Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back to our interview series IDMonSite. My name is Daniela Neubacher. I'm working as a research associate at the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe. And with me today is Alena Vershinina. Hello, Alena.
Hello from Moscow.
It's great that you're here. So last week, the prison sentence of opposition leader Alexei Navalny triggered another wave of protests in Russia. And since Navalny's return, Russians have protested on the streets in numbers not seen since the 1990s. The government reacted with brutal police force. Thousands got detained. In addition, EU-Russian relations have reached another low. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, relations between Russia and the West have been strained. On Monday, diplomats of several EU members got expelled for the supposed offense of attending anti-Putin protests. And Russia is struggling at the same time with the pandemic, of course, and faces severe socio-economic problems and observes rising discontent within the population. So in today's episode, we would like to put a bit of put these current developments into perspective. And therefore, I'm very happy that we have Alena Vershinina with us today. Alena, you graduated from Faculty of Journalism in Lomonosov Moscow State University in 2014. Already during your studies, you started to work for the Russian independent radio station Echo of Moscow, where you have worked as a news editor, correspondent, and anchor for more than 7 years. So currently you are reporting as a Moscow correspondent by the Russian service of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. So you have real first-hand experience from recent protests in Russia and Moscow. And in addition, you're one of the lucky ones, you told me, that already got vaccinated against Corona. So how is it, the Sputnik
Yes, I
experience?
can demonstrate my certificate with 2 marks that I received both dose of Sputnik vaccine. To be honest, I don't know how lucky I am because in Russia, we have a very strange situation with coronavirus because last April, Vladimir Putin didn't declare a real lockdown and a real quarantine. What we have, it was a so-called high alert regime when people for less than 2 months were supposed to stay at home and not go in for work. But Russia is a very poor country. Even Moscow is, of course, Moscow is a rich city, but the whole Russia is a poor country. And according to our economists and to scientists, less than 30% of Russians have any savings. So people couldn't stay at home. And that's why even in the middle of May, Russia practically returned to so-called normal life. Of course, we are supposed to wear masks, and in Moscow, for example, we're supposed to wearing gloves in metro or in public space. No, we don't know for what, because all medics said in some and say now that there is no protection of gloves for people, but rules are rules. But people are not afraid, and most people don't wear mask properly. Practically in Moscow, most of people wear a mask here
Yeah, well,
without covering nose.
in Austria.
And yes. I know that there are some the same situation in many countries because people are people everywhere, not only in Russia, but we don't know the real situations because we can't believe to Russian statistics. Because every day the headquarter for the fight against coronavirus in Russia published new numbers of new cases and new deaths of coronavirus, but we can't believe to these numbers because, for example, my parents live not in Moscow but in the small industrial city, the central of Russia, and I'm not sure. I think in late of September or in October, I made a report about the statistics with coronavirus in Russia, and I analyzed numbers, everyday numbers in Lipetsk, only in Lipetsk. And for example, it was only a week, and we have 37 new cases, 37 new cases. The next date will be 39. The next date will be 38 new cases. So it's not real numbers. So we can't believe to these numbers, and so we don't know the real picture of what's going on in Russia and in Moscow with coronavirus. But what we can say that the situation is better because, well, in spring and in autumn, even ordinary people on the streets can see a lot of numbers of ambulances that was going everywhere in the city. Now, no, there is no so many ambulances, and the hospitals are not full, and a lot of hospitals that were reopened especially for coronavirus, and they didn't function for any other diseases. They function in ordinary way, so the situation is much better. And on 7th of December, Russia started this program of massive vaccination. And well, in normal country, this program started from medics and from elderly people. But what happens in Russia? They started from Moscow. Because officially, yeah, well, you need to understand that in Russia, we have two worlds, official worlds and real life. And according to our officials, this program started only with medics and from the people who worked for education system. But in fact, you can go to hospital and without any documents that demonstrated your work in a hospital, for example, or in school or in the university, you can receive this dose of vaccine. And some of my colleagues, journalists, they received even their second dose earlier than medics in other regions of Russia. So it's ridiculous. But another problem is that a lot of Russians are skeptical about this vaccine. They don't believe not only in Sputnik, in vaccine at all, and especially in Sputnik. And even in my very specific circle of journalistic circle, even a month ago, I heard some talks that I prefer to wait for Pfizer vaccine, not for Sputnik. Now we understand that Russia will not never, but Russia will receive Pfizer, I think, in 2 or 3 years, because Pfizer has problems with European countries and the United States, so it's not for Russia. And last week, yes, but last week we received this publication in Lancet magazine that Sputnik, it's okay, it's about the third phase of the test of this vaccine. So there are people who believe in science and in vaccine. They decided that, well, Sputnik is better than nothing, so we will receive this Sputnik vaccine. And I know some medics who participated in this second phase of testing vaccine in the very early days in September. Now they are okay. So they received their antibodies, they worked in red zone, and they are well. So I not believe in Sputnik, I believe in science. So I decided that, well, I need this vaccine, and now I'm like,
so
for example, yes, and for example, now the situation with vaccination is getting better and better. Of course, we are not, for example, Israel, because Russia could had a chance to become Israel, because we have our own vaccine, and all we had to do is to produce this 46 million doses of vaccines. But we can't do it, and that's why there are a lot of problems with producing vaccine, not of developing of vaccine, but with producing. But for example, in Lipetsk, where my parents live, they received the first doses of vaccine, and I know that this week my mom is planning to receive her first dose.
I see, but I'm happy that you're fit, you're fine after your vaccination, sitting in front of us. And
yes.
I'm happy that at least you don't have to fear this aspect.
Yes,
now.
because I have a very strong immune response, and you know that there is, well, people who are on my age, about their late 20s, early 30s, they practically have the same problems, that they have a very strong immune response. But then the elder person is, the less problem he or she will have with this vaccine. So everything is for antibody.
Great. So let's maybe slowly come to the protests.
Okay.
But as a general question, because we were talking about Corona, I was wondering, what do you think? What are the kind of effects of Corona in this protest movement? What is new now, or what special challenges are coming up with this?
Okay, we have a very boring last year because, well, this is, you need to understand that this protest is not the massive protest since the early 90s. No, of course, there is a lot of comparison of the protests in the, I think even before the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990. But we have the previous wave of protest in 2011 and 2012, just before the return of Vladimir Putin to Kremlin, because, well, we have a 4 years of another president. Nobody remember his name, but we have our third president, Mr. Medvedev, between 2008 2012. And after the parliament election in December of 2011, we had the first very massive wave of protests, because people blame the authorities that they fraud the election, they stole our election, our voices. But there is two big differences between that the first wave of protests in 2011 and these protests, because well, one more time that we have a real word and official word, because according to our constitution, to Russian constitution, we have an article 31 that guarantee freedom of meetings, but we have a law of police. In this law of police, it is every normal lawyer will say to you that this law of police is incontroversial to our constitution, because according to this law, all massive meeting action should be the organizers of this action should receive a permission from local authorities. And in 2011, 2012, the organizers of these very massive meetings, they received this permission, and these meetings were official. Now Navalny and his supporters, every time they say that our actions are peaceful, we are without any weapons, and that's why we do not need any permission, because we have our right to gathering peacefully without weapons, so we can use these. But
and they don't get the permission now if they register?
No, of course no, because of last summer in Russia we had a voting for the amendments to our constitutions, and there were some wishes to organize protests, to organize actions against this vote, and not against the constitution or these amendments, but against the process, because we have because the voting we can vote for these amendments to the constitution for a week because of the coronavirus. It was ridiculous. Because we don't have free elections, so what they could do during, not for a day, but for a week. But all actions were forbidden because of the situation with coronavirus. But just a week before this voting in Moscow, we had a military parade because Putin wanted to celebrate the 75th anniversary of victory in the Second World War. And I was covering this, not this parade, but because, well, I think you saw these pictures from Moscow with tanks on the streets of Russia. Yes, and a lot of people every year. This is a tradition. Every year we have this parade, and every year people gathering on the streets between Red Square and our own White House when the tanks and other machines are returning from the Red Square to where they are kept in ordinary life. And it's not only dozens of people, thousands of people on the avenue, on both sides of avenue. And this year was the same, despite any coronavirus. The only difference between the ordinary life was because there were a lot of volunteers who have masks and who asked everyone, if you don't have a mask, you can take our own. So, but no social distance and something like this. And a lot of people took these masks, but they didn't wear them. So what for? And this time is the same, because officially it's impossible to receive a permission to any protest actions, because if Putin or Moscow local authorities need to gather their supporters, of course they will not have any problems. And even more now, the closest supporters of Navalny, we have a new criminal case, and Navalny's closest, not supporters, they're the member of his headquarters of Fund of Fighting Against Corruption. He's the leader of these organizations. They are supposed to be guilty in organizing this gathering of so many people. And Moscow authorities, they said that in this gathering of people there were 19 cases of people who were ill with coronavirus. So Navalny's supporters are guilty for this.
I see.
This is a new current, so-called new.
Thank you
new
very
reality.
much for pointing out these differences. I think this has really been a bit missed in comparing the protest waves in recent years and also in 1990s. What is special now. Maybe before we talk a bit more about the protests, the reasons and the effects on Russian politics and society, maybe you brought us some video footage.
Yes, let's watch it. This is a video from Moscow, from Pushkinskaya Square. Is a very center of Moscow, just one straight street from the Kremlin. I think it's about 2 kilometers away from the Kremlin, where people from the very early 1960s gathering for the protests to demand their rights. For example, there is a very famous pictures in Russia when Soviet dissidents were gathering this place and demand that Soviet authorities should give their rights of gathering. So let's see what we had in Moscow on the very first protest. It was January 23rd.
And you did the coverage of that, or you and your team, or? Yes,
we were coverage. We have a live stream for our YouTube of Radio Free Europe. The whole actions we were gathering everywhere in Moscow.
Okay, so let's take a look into it, and I hope one can also hear the sound of it.
Девушка, за что вас задерживают? За то, что я раздаю памятки о том, что делать с рекомендованиями. Как вас зовут? Используйте маски и перчатки. За что его?
Уважаемые граждане, данное мероприятие является незаконным. Мы делаем все, чтобы обеспечить вашу безопасность. Мы делаем все, чтобы обеспечить вашу безопасность. Будьте бдительны и по возможности покиньте незаконное мероприятие. Уважаемые покиньте незаконное мероприятие. Данное мероприятие является незаконным. Мы делаем все, чтобы
No, we don't need this. Well, I think it's very difficult to watch this video because there is a lot of not even force, but a lot of brutality against the absolutely peaceful demonstrations. You know that I'm not a supporter of Navalny, and to be honest, if I had a chance to vote for him during the free elections, I think I would never vote for him because we have a lot of, I'm not support for him, but when you see these videos and there and you know that in Moscow and in St. Petersburg it's much easier to go out on the protest than in other especially small cities, and if we are talking about the difference between the protests in 2011 and now, is that these protests happened not only in Moscow or in St. Petersburg or in Yekaterinburg. Yekaterinburg is a very large city in the very center of Russia. It is on the imaginary border between Asia and Europe. But in a lot of small towns, even in Malipinsk, where there where very small amounts of young people live, even there people came out for protests. Of course, it was only, I think, hundreds of people, not thousands, hundreds, but it's a lot for small, especially industrial city.
Mm-hmm. Also, I realized in the videos, it's not like often the official Russian claims are that it's just young people, foreign age.
Yes, and for example, when practically every time of this video, you can hear that the police use loudspeakers. Of course, they spoke in Russian, but I want to translate because it's ridiculous. Because the police, not police, the authorities, they repeat every time through these loudspeakers that this action is not permitted. So go away, and you saw just now what that police beat peaceful demonstrators, but the authorities said that we are doing our best to keep your safety. And exactly in the same moment, the police that resembled not the ordinary police, but some fighters from war stars with their. So it was. in my life, professional life, I covered a lot of protests, but it was the first time that I was afraid that something can happen to me. Although all journalists in Russia, when they covering these protests, we need to wear some special vest with the name of press.
Yeah, but there are also videos of police force and violence against people from the press. I saw. I don't know if this was fake or.
No, they're not fake, because this was the first protest on January 23rd. Then we have the protest in 1 week after. It was January 31st, and we had even more brutality and more police violence, because, well, Navalny supporters, they wanted to organize this action not in the Pushkinsky Square in Moscow, but on the square nearby our Federal Security Service, ex-KGB. And to stop them, Moscow authorities, they really blocked the whole center of Moscow. They even closed the 7 central station of metro. Even during the lockdown in April, Moscow authorities didn't stop the metro. This time, of course, it was possible to use metro, but it was impossible to go out on these stations. And when the Navalny supporters decided to relocate to this place of action to another places, authorities decided to close another metro stations. Mm-hmm. And after that, we had this third protest after the court of Navalny. Navalny already has, I think, three hearings, court hearings in three different cases. And after the most important one, when the court replaced Navalny's suspended sentence with a real one, his supporters came out in the very evening. I think it happened only in Moscow, and there were only dozens of very young people. Young, but it wasn't teenagers. It was students and people in their early 20s. And my colleagues were covering this, and I see this on their videos, that police blocked dozens of protests in the backyards in the very center of Moscow, and they beat them there. Although all these young people have their hands up and repeated, we are peaceful, we are without guns, we are peaceful, we are without guns. But there is no normal reaction of police.
Thank you very much. So you already mentioned Navalny very much, but maybe let's talk a bit shortly about his person and his, let's say, his meaning, because by his return and by knowing that that he was going to be sentenced most likely and has to go to jail and will face pretty hard repressions, let's say, he anyway returned, and by this he was considered by many as a hero. Some even were talking about martyrdom, and so but yet Navalny, he's also had a lot of, let's say, conflicted messages in public in the last years, and he's maybe not that person that maybe the West, maybe Western observers also would like to see in him. So I would like to know a bit more about his political agenda in your perspective.
Well, from let's start from very beginning. Who is Mr. Navalny? Because I think for the yes, it's a long story. Because, well, Navalny began his so-called political career because in Russia it's possible to be a real politician if you are not Mr. Putin. He begins his political career in early, I think, in the first decade of this century, but he was a blogger. He started from the blogger, and with his fight against corruptions. What Navalny did that time? Navalny had a very popular internet blog on platform Live Journal that was very, very popular in Russia. And he also bought a very small amounts of shares of Russian most important public companies, not only public Russian companies, like, for example, Gazprom or Rosneft, the biggest gas and oil companies in Russia. And because he's a shareholder, he received public every year, not public, every year report about what's going on inside the companies. And he saw a lot of corruptions. And then he became to publish this information, because this information, it's impossible to receive it if you are not a shareholders. And so
more or less.
Yes. And so he became a very popular blogger, but blogger, he was known in Moscow, but I don't think even in outside Moscow region. Because he was a blogger. But then we have our first wave of protests in 2011 and 2012, and Navalny became one of the leaders. And he was Putin and people nearby Putin, they practically during all that time, they repeated and repeated, we need some figures. We don't believe that these protests, they are happens because people decided to came out for protesting. We needed some leaders to speak to. And Navalny was one of them. But of course, officially, Putin and his team, they never spoke to any opposition leader. But Navalny's and other opposition leaders, they made their attempts. But well, in Russia, opposition isn't a unity. There are a lot of conflicts inside this opposition. Every politician is against other politicians. There are a lot of compromise and so on. So well, and then in 2013, Navalny decided to take part in the elections of Moscow mayor. And it was the only elections that Navalny was permitted to take part. And although we don't have free elections, but Navalny received about 20%. And it was extraordinary because in reality, Navalny declared that he received even more, and so we need to organize a second tour of these elections. But the authorities said, no, we have another result, and so on. And during this elections process, Navalny was under his first criminal case, and he received his first criminal sentence. This sentence was real, although everyone understood it was a political motivated case, but he received 3 years 3 year sentence. And it was, I think it was the 18th of July. And the hearing wasn't in Moscow, but it wasn't in Kirov. This is another city at the central Russia. And after the sentence in the evening, a lot of people came out in Moscow, in the very center of Moscow, in the street nearby our parliament building. And the very next day, the court decided to replace Navalny's real sentence to suspended. Magic, of course, and how people who knew the situations in Kremlin said that time that the authorities decided to replace because they saw how many people supported Navalny in the streets of Moscow.
Well, then they changed their tactics now.
Yes, but since that moment, Navalny can't take part in any elections because he has a sentence, because he's a criminal element, like Putin and his circle can call him. Another another chapter of Navalny's career is 2017. When Navalny declared that he wanted to take part in presidential elections of 2018. He and his lawyers said that all his sentences, that time he had already 2 sentences, or both of them are suspended. That the European Court declares that all his cases were politically motivated, and even more, Russia paid him for these sentences. But of course, our Central Election Commission didn't permit Navalny to take part in these elections. But what Navalny did, and it was practically the greatest decisions. He decided to play like if we were in normal European country. He organized a lot of headquarters in different regions of Russia. And he made a real tour with real meetings, with real program, and so with his supporters. It was practically the same like it was happened last year in the United States. Because in Russia, I think since 1996, we don't have anything like this. And that's why Navalny now has a lot of supporters in different regions of Russia. But what else I need to say to you about his agenda?
No, and I would love to start here, or to quickly stop here and ask how strong you think is this network when it comes to the fight against state propaganda. Because we all saw the video of the presentation of this palace on the Black Sea, and we know that it has more than 100 million views. But do you think a majority of Russians have seen it? And
No. Of course, this video is extraordinary, and I think that outside Russia, people even don't understand how important this video for this protest is. But of course, not all these. I think it's 110 million of viewers. It's not people inside Russia, and because I think yesterday we received new psychological data that only every 4th person in Russia not saw this video, but only hear about it. So we don't, and a lot of Russians don't believe to this video. They think that it's fake. But the younger the person is, the more he or she will believe to this video, because Russia is a very corrupted country. The level of corruption is, I think, it's extraordinary, and the index of corruption by Transparency International is the best proof of it, and that's why people is easier to believe that these 3D reconstructions of this so-called Putin's palace is true. And that's why a lot of people during the protests, when I was covering them, I spoke to people who came out to the streets and asked them why they decided to do this and what was the reason. And there were practically a half of people who said that it was their first time when they decided to participate in protests. And they repeat, a lot of people, that we are protesting not for Navalny, we are protesting for themselves. Because in this film about Putin's dacha, or Putin's palace, there is a very important episode about the cost estimate of this palace. And for example, ordinary toilet brush in this palace costs $700. Ordinary person in Russia, because according to Russian authorities, middle class status, if a person receives, I think it's about $230. I'm not joking. This is real numbers. So if you're receiving $230 and a toilet brush costs $700, it's
out of proportions.
Yes.
So maybe because we spent already much time on that, maybe let's come to the EU-Russian relations. How did you perceive the reaction from EU member countries, EU officials? Was this a topic in official state media even? Or how was the reaction?
No, it's not. It's not a topic because, well, you know that it's European countries as well as United States. Even if they would like, they practically can't do nothing because sanctions they don't work. Practically all people who are from the inner circle of Putin, they are already under sanctions after the Crimea's annexion. So, and what else, for example, European Union can do? Nothing. Although Navalny supporters, now they are for a new package of sanctions, but, well, for Putin, it doesn't mean anything. So, and to be honest, what else we can do? To block Russia, like North Korea, it's impossible because Russia has a nuclear weapon. So nobody wanted to be in a conflict with a very large nuclear country.
What is also interesting is, of course, the closeness to the protests in Belarus. Sometimes people try to draw parallels to the developments there. Do you think there are any parallels, any connection regarding the problems behind the protests? Maybe also in regard to gender, maybe to gender aspects or generational aspects.
Yes, of course, there is a generational aspect because, well, the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, is in power even more time than Vladimir Putin. But they have the same problems, and you know that we have our how it's called in English, I don't remember, our brotherhood unit of Russia and Belarus. And last week we had a lot of jokes that Putin for last week made for this integrity much more than for previous 20 years. Because when we received the videos from the pre-trial taint centers were full of people, it was very, of course it's not like in Belarus where the protests were beat heavily in these centers. In Russia, we have a very high level of police violence in the streets, but in these prisons for the detained, no. And Russian authorities, they decided to stop this violence. Because after the decisions of Navalny supporters to stop protests for some time, maybe before spring or before the beginning of summer, because it's, well, now in Moscow, for example, is -16. It's rather cold to be for a long time, to be out for a long time. But when we are speaking about Siberia or the Urals region, it's even colder. So it's impossible to organize revolution when it's -53rd. I think it was in the north region of Russia when we also had protests. And so it's very easier to make these parallels, and people and even Navalny supporters try to do this, not parallels, but to do some methods. For example, to coordinate people through the Telegram channels, like it happened in Belarus last summer. But I think the biggest difference is that Putin, not like Lukashenko, decided to stop this violence, to stop this police brutality, and so on. So we need to see what was going on and whether we will have more police brutality or not.
You also brought a second video of the detention.
Yes, this is a bit, well, after the Navalny's case, and when people came out to the protest for the third time in 2 weeks, all of these prisons for detainees were full, and there, because more than For 2 weeks, more than 11,000 people were detained in Russia. It's very high, a very large number, and all these prisons were full, and Moscow authorities need to organize how it is called. In Moscow, we have some center for foreign for detained foreign citizens. This is the time center, and now these centers are used for political prisoners, for political detainees. And when we begin to talk about the situation with coronavirus, and the authorities are blamed Navalny supporters that they are they organize protest when the situation with coronavirus is not very good. But after that, they detained thousands of people, and some of these people now are kept in very small rooms in these special prisons. And for example, some of them, normally they lived 4 or 8 people in one room, very small room in this prison. But because they were full and we have a collapse of police system, people were kept for the first 40 hours, were kept for 20 people in the room for 4 people, for example. It was ridiculous. So, and these conditions, it's not in like the best hotels in Europe, for example. You will see in your own eyes what we have now in Moscow.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's watch your video.
No.
I think it's the wrong one. Yes.
Yes, it's the previous.
So there is no live stream without technical problems, but we will find that out.
Условия, в которых все спят.
Сфотографировать нас? Можно? Сфотографировать нас. Так, это камера для 4, 4 человека, 4 места. Сергей Смирнов, собственной персоной. Все хорошо. Время какое у нас, который час, скажите?
Время 16.
Можно еще один? 16:10, да.
А шампуни другие?
So you can see that this is not a 5-star hotels, because people for the first time didn't even have some mattresses in their rooms. And well, and what's the difference is this, you saw a bald man on this video, and this man, this is he is an editor-in-chief of one of the independent mass media, and he was arrested, and now he has 25 days in the prison because he retweeted a joke about himself. And the court decided that it wasn't just a retweet, a joke, that was that it was the official information about the future protests. It's ridiculous because this is a repression against the freedom of press. Previously, it happened sometimes, but not in such level. Because even today, the police, for example, came to some of my colleagues with special warnings that they shouldn't take part in protests. And when my colleagues answered that we are journalists, it's our work, we are not participators. But the police, okay, but we need to do this, and that's because it's became possible because we have a lot of cameras everywhere in Moscow, and that's why a lot of people in police, they spend hours and hours to watch these videos from these cameras, and that's the problem. But I think that mask helps potential protests to keep their security, because if a person wearing mask, it's not only help to protect themselves from coronavirus, but also it helps to protect from this police attention.
Yeah, so at least a little advantage of this whole
yes
situation, and let's hope that they don't have this facial recognition programs as used in Hong Kong, which is already trying to identify protesters with wearing the masks, which is really worrying.
Scare.
Yes. So Alena, thank you very much for this great on-site experience of the protests in Russia. Maybe as a last outlook, what are your personal hopes now for the upcoming weeks?
To be honest, I don't know, because I don't believe that the strategy of non-stopping protests can work, because the more protests we will have, the less people will participate in them. But I want to hope that at least Putin decided to free Navalny. It will be not a victory of Navalny, but it can help to make a situation less extraordinary high, because now because now we have practically the same situation like in the United States, because one part of society is for Putin, other part of society is against Putin. It's not for Navalny, it's against Putin. And more and more young people in other generations, they are against Putin, because we have a lot of people who not only live the whole life with Putin, they even born when Putin was already a president. It's ridiculous. It's not normal.
So yeah, I agree with you, and I share your hope of some upcoming dialogue, if not at the level of politicians, maybe on the level of population and in individual level. So thank you very much again for your work. Thank you for being there and reporting. We will also link you and tag you on social media so people can follow you and your work. Very grateful for that. It's not for granted. It's dangerous, and we were very happy that we could talk to you. And
thank you for having me. And I hope that I did my best to try to explain the situation, how the situation seemed inside Russia.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.